This is All India Radio, Power of Listening. Under this series, tonight we take you on a journey to the world of yet another magnificent facet of the traditional Indian knowledge systems. I'm Manoj Mindkar. In today's episode, we shall be focusing on the ancient Indian legal system. The expert on the show is Advocate Chetana Gosavi, Eminent writer and Indologist. Talking to her is Nisha Poyarekar, Science Communicator and writer. Stay tuned.
Namaskar. For smooth functioning of any society, a thorough legal system is of utmost importance. India has a glorious past of about 5,000 years, and it wouldn't have worked without a competent legal framework. Today, the topic of discussion is ancient Indian legal system, and we have with us Chetana Gosavi, an eminent writer, Indologist and legal expert, to share a few insights about this topic. Namaskar. So, what do you mean by a legal system?
First, to understand what is a legal system, let us see modern definition of what a law is. So it says that law is a command of a sovereign to which people pay habitual obedience, and non-obedience attracts sanction. So if you try to decipher it, it simply means that there has to be someone who makes a law. Then there has to be obedience, means the law has to be properly executed or the people have to act as per the law. And non-obedience attracts sanction, which means that if there is a violation of law, there is a punishment or some kind of a sanction. So essentially we are talking about legislature, executive and judiciary. So all these things put together make a legal system.
So, how far back does our Indian legal system go? As in, what is the antiquity of our legal system?
Yeah, that's a good question. And generally people think that Indian legal system starts with Vedas, which in a way is true. But we also have to look at something beyond Vedas. As you rightly said, we have a past of at least 5,000 years, at least. And modern day research has proven that it could be pushed back to even 7,000 years. But let's even take conservatively 5,000 years. And what was there 5,000 years back? What is it that we find? And that is the entire thing about Indus civilization. The Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, and in modern India, we are still finding many more sites of Indus civilization. So mature Harappan or Indus civilization is dated to 2500 BC. Okay, so that is about 4,700 years from now. What do we find there? What do we see there? You must have read in your college books and even in your school that these were urban settlements. We have found buildings, we have found roads, we have found drainage systems, we have found granaries, we have found ports. All of this suggests that it was a very, very developed civilization and urban settlement. And we all understand that any urban settlement, any kind of a developed civilization cannot function without proper rules and laws. Unfortunately for us, there is no written record of whatever was happening in Indus civilization. All that we have is the material evidence.
That is because the script has not been deciphered yet.
That's right. So we know that there was a script, but we do not know how to read that script. See, the earliest known written code of law is said to be of Hammurabi in Mesopotamian civilization, and that dates to 1894 to 1595 BC, somewhere around that. And then when you look at Indus civilization, the mature Indus civilization, it dates 1,000 years before Hammurabi. So there is every reason to believe that there must have been something of that sort in Indus civilization. When you look at all those, you also find seals and sealings which were used for marking the traded goods. There were ports giving a very concrete evidence of well-developed commerce and the trade. And there was a lot of trade of goods. And most importantly, there were weights and measures. So weights and measures, and there was a standardization of all these things, which very clearly suggests that there was a legal system. Interestingly, in the later times, when we come to Mauryan times, the weights and measures found in Mauryan system were exactly like the ones found in Indus civilization. So there also was some continuity which we have lost probably. Then in the later Indus civilization, you parallelly see the early Vedic systems. And early Vedic systems, as we can see, were mainly the tribals, Aryan tribes, and the agro-pastoral communities.
So we are talking about the customs that the tribes followed.
Yes, not just the customs, there also again was a defined system which may not be as complex as what we see today. But there was a proper system, as you can see. Even in Vedas, although there is no direct legal system mentioned, but there are mentions of, tribal chiefdom, which is Rajan. There are references of Rajan being elected by people. There are references of Sabha and Samiti, which were the people's bodies who were helping the Rajan or the tribal chief in the conduct of the affairs of that particular tribe was concerned. So every tribe might have different customs or the customary laws, but there was definitely a legal system in place which may not be as complex as we see in the later periods. And then, of course, there is no mention of separate judicial officers, but there were some officers like Purohita or priest who were there to assist the king or the Rajan. Territorial administration was not yet a norm. But when you come to personal laws, marriage as a system, marriage as an institution was an established thing. So there were definitely rules and regulations which were governing these institutions. There is a concept of Varna, which is later developed into the entire, complete system of Varna and Ashrama, as we all know, Chaturvarnya and Chaturashrama. And by the later Vedic period, that is about 1000 to 500 BCE, which is just before Buddha, we see that there was a lot of development in the agriculture, craft, weaving, leatherwork, pottery, carpentry, all these things were developing. Obviously, that shows us as the society gets complex and as there are specializations, there will be laws, rules and regulations which will be there to take care of all these things.
So are there any special laws for conduct in their day-to-day activities, or what were the duties of the citizens of the nation that was ruled by the so-called Rajan? Or were there any special trade laws defining that period?
Before all this, let us understand what was the concept of law in our system. Okay, so, what did they call as, what was law for them? Mm-hmm. And to which again we have to go back to Vedas. So in Rig Veda, there is no mention of law as we talk today, but there is a mention of something called as Rita, Vrata or Dharma. All of them basically means the supreme principle that holds the universe together. So you can say in a way this was a concept of universal law, and it came from whoever the Parabrahman or whatever you want to call it, because there was no maker of this law, because this is supposed to be a universal law. It originates from the cosmos. And who was going to uphold it? The upholder of this law was Varuna. He was called as Ritasa Gopa, that is the protector of the Rita. And there are descriptions that if somebody doesn't obey this law, somebody deviates from this law, Varuna is the one who punishes that person. So in a way you can see this basic principle of making the law, executing it and punishing for not following it. But there is no legal system per se, as we have been talking about in the Vedas. So this concept of Vrata or Dharma, essentially, now Dharma, the word comes from Sanskrit dhatu, dhru, dhara, to hold, to support, to nurture. So Dharma essentially is the one who keeps the society together, who holds the society together. Even today we say that, law is for what? Law is for order. And what is that order? Order in the society. What are we looking at? We are looking at keeping the whole society properly controlled and behaving in the manner that it should. And that is what was called as Dharma. Now Dharma has been interpreted and, has been talked about in various ways. But if we have to strictly look at it from this point of view, for us, what is Dharma? Dharma has many connotations like privileges, duties, obligations of a man, his standard of conduct, and all of this as a member of an Aryan community. This is very important because that is meant for a particular community. Mm-hmm. And that happens everywhere. Even today you can see that the laws are meant for the society which you belong to.
Right. It's never for a specific individual. It always pertains to a larger group.
Correct. And so if you change the group, the law also changes.
Right.
Suppose tomorrow you decide to travel abroad.
Right.
You will have to obey the laws of the other country.
Yeah. When in Rome, do as the Romans do.
Absolutely. Exactly. That's the way it is. So as a member of Aryan community, as a member of a particular caste or Varna, and as a person in a particular stage of life. So that is what Dharma actually means. So there will be dharma according to varna, means your caste. There will be dharma according to your ashrama, means your stage of life. So if you are a student, you have different duties. If you have become a gruhastha, you have different duties. So on, so forth. And so if you do not abide by this system, there was a sanction, and this sanction is prayashchitta or penance. So before going to punishment, let us consider what this concept of prayashchitta is in a very simple way. Prayashchitta is doing good what you have wronged. Okay, so to me, and I feel this is very important, this is a little different from punishment according to me. I mean, people might differ from me, but it is a little different in the sense prayashchitta gives you a chance to come back to the society. So prayashchitta is not like you are punished and you are cut off from the society. So it is not a punishment in that sense. Prayashchitta is always that you make penance, you make the wrong good, and you be back to the society. So your assimilation back in the mainstream of the society was a very important thing for us. And it is a little different from mere punishment.
It also sounds to me like it is self-driven. So if I take up penance, then it is up to me to come back into society, and that ties me stronger to the community.
Correct. And then, broadly, there were two aspects of system. One was achara, which is law, and the other was vyavahara, that is administration of justice. So at every stage, you will find that these things are there, and then we see that they go on developing. As the society becomes more and more complex, more and more developed, the system also goes on changing and developing.
So the rules that we have spoken about, or the social conduct laws that we've spoken about, were apt for the agro-pastoral Vedic tribes. But as we evolved into chiefdoms, how did the legal hierarchy also change with that?
Hierarchy changed as in the status of the king started becoming more and more powerful. And then the king, assisted by his ministers and special ministers for justice. So a system of dispensing justice started becoming more and more complex, more and more evolved. See, we have this concept of attributing everything to Vedas to create the sanctity, that is to, make them sacrosanct. But that does not mean that we were rigid. That does not mean that we were not open to change. When we say dharma, on the one hand, we are saying that dharma is supreme and nobody is above that. That is one. But at the same time, when we talk of dharma in terms of duties, privileges, and all those things that we talked about, it was open to change. And there is very concrete thing for that, where Manu in Manusmriti very clearly says that one should abandon what was once dharma if it ends in unhappiness or if it has become hateful to people. Subsequently, even Yajnavalkya reiterates and says that what was once allowed as dharma should not be practiced if people have come to hate it or if it does not lead to heaven. Now, what does it mean? That the entire legal system was meant to maintain the happiness of people.
Right.
And so if a particular law stopped functioning as a means or a tool to happiness to people, that could be changed. I think that is very, very important for us to understand. Our legal system, they did understand that societies are dynamic, and the dynamics of society will require changes in the law. So dharma also had to be dynamic. Nothing could be static.
Right. The laws have to reflect the changing nature of the society.
Absolutely. I mean, if the law does not do that, then obviously it is a dead law.
Right.
Nobody is going to obey it. I mean, today we talk of internalization of law, and people will internalize only if they see the benefit in it. And the minute you stop internalizing it, that is going to be a redundant law for it. It is the same thing, and that has been very well accepted, documented in our legal system. Another aspect, which is a corollary to this is, be it Manu, be it Kautilya, be it Narad, be it whoever, all those Dharma Shastrakaras have always upheld the importance of customs and usages. Because they said that customs and usages, they emanate from the society. That is what people understand as, the right way of doing certain things. And therefore, customs and importance were above the Shastric law. So if there is something which is mentioned in the Shastra, but it was not in concurrence with the custom, it is the custom which will prevail and not the Shastra. So look at even this kind of a flexibility and acceptance of people's participation in the entire process. And I think it is a very important highlight of our system that we have to understand. I mean, it happens everywhere. Throughout the globe, customs are important. But we, even at that time, I mean, some 2500 years back also, we have documented records saying that the customs are superior to the Shastra. I mean, it's a very famous saying of Panini, wherever there is, Panini was a grammarian. In a very different context, he said this, but he said that Rudhihi Shastrat Baliyasi. The custom is stronger than the theory. I mean, Shastra you can take in any way. You can take it as a treaty on a dharma, or you can take it as a theory of law. As we said, it started with the tribes. And the regionality matters, their environment matters. Depending upon their day-to-day needs, their customs will be different sometimes. And that assimilation has to be there. That give and take with the Shastric text has to be there. And both these things were very well accepted in our Indian legal system.
So is this a continuum? As in, do we still have in our modern legal system examples wherein we give customs importance over what is codified?
Yes, definitely. I mean, in many personal laws, this is a case, and especially with the tribal laws. So wherever we have indigenous tribes, even today, the codified law does not apply to them. And everything that happens with them happens according to their customary law. Especially with the personal matters. I mean, obviously you cannot have this kind of a thing for the criminal law. Like if there is a case of murder, a tribal cannot be tried as per the customary law.
Correct.
But, in the matters of marriage, divorce, adoption, all these things, the customary law prevails.
Another discussion of what was the concept of Stridhana. Was this codified? Or was divorce treated with the same ousting by society like we see right now? What were the terms for remarriages?
Okay, so let's understand that there was a concept of Stridhan and very well enumerated by Yajnavalkya in the Yajnavalkya Smriti, which dates to 300 AD to 500 600 AD. But around that time, Stridhan was a concept which was accepted, developed. So anything that a woman receives from her husband as a gift or from her relatives or with what she earns out of her own efforts was considered as Stridhan. And she was the absolute legal owner of the Stridhan. But there are many more aspects to it. Then coming to marriage, divorce and stuff like that. See, marriage was always considered as a sacrosanct thing. And we know that it is considered as a divine obligation. So once married, there is no chance of separation except for the death, right? But interestingly, I mean, we do not have this concept of divorce, especially in the later years. But interestingly, Arthashastra, Kautilya's Arthashastra, which is dated to about 300 BC, he interestingly makes a provision where he says that divorce is not possible otherwise, but in a very rare case, if husband and wife have reached to a stage, where they have become almost enemies to each other. Okay, Dvesh is the word which he has used. Okay, that they have gone to an extent of hating each other to such an extent that they have almost become enemies to each other. Then they are allowed to separate from each other, but only with mutual consent. So it's not possible that, husband hates his wife and so he decides on his own and he divorces his wife. No, that is not possible. Or even if both of them have gone to that extent of hating each other, if both do not agree, then there's no divorce. But of course, later Manu and Yajnavalkya do not accept this. We talked about remarriage of widows or remarriage of separated wives and everything. Again, we see a similar phenomena where Manu and Yajnavalkya do not accept remarriage of a widow or a separated wife, but Kautilya accepts even that. And he says that for a separated wife, if a woman's husband has gone away, if his proshita means he has gone away and he is not heard of or he has not come back for 10 years, then she is allowed to remarry. And if she had a child already, then she had to wait for 12 years. So, a special provision is made because the welfare of the children has to be taken into consideration. Right. But for such a long time, if the husband is not to be seen and if he is not to be heard of, then the wife has a right to remarry. Interestingly, again here, Kautilya very specifically says, but this will not apply if the person has been sent on an official duty by the king. Because it is possible. I mean, if he has been sent away for some duty, he is not able to come back for 10 years, then wife does not have that kind of a right. So see how the legal mind is actually working in, making provisions, making exceptions to that. And in all these matters, let me tell you, Nisha, not just Indian legal system or not just the treaties on law, but generally the entire knowledge system in India has been such that they have always considered a particular issue from very, very different angles. So many different angles, and they have developed a proper system of logical thinking. That is something which we have to understand. And law is, of course, law is everything.
So now that we have discussed personal laws, I'm sure for the upkeep of the societal law and order situation, there will definitely be criminal laws. But what about commercial laws? What about taxation? Were there provisions for these as well?
Well, what do you think? There has to be, right? When we have this kind of a developed society, and it is so very interesting to see, as I said earlier, that in the civilization itself, you see a standardization. By the time you come to Mauryan, when, after second urbanization and all these urban states were getting developed, in Manusmriti and other smritis, and also you have some mentions, but Arthashastra gives a very, very detailed and elaborate description of, all the administrative procedures and administrative laws. And it is amazing to see. Even if I start listing the names of the departments that he has created, I think the time will not be enough. But let me give you a few examples, So there were adhyakshas or superintendents, superintendents of agriculture, superintendents of land. There were superintendents who were responsible for measurement of land. Then there were superintendents of trade routes. There were superintendents of commerce who were called as Panyadhyaksha, who were in charge of control of supply, prices, purchase of sale and of commodities, and so on and so forth. There were Pattanadhyaksha, which is the superintendent of port towns, very clearly telling us that there was a developed sea trade. What will be interesting for you to know is there were superintendents of Panagara, that is liquor shops. So licensing of liquor and the sale of liquor was controlled even from those times. And it was also understood that on the one hand, while there is a need to control all these things, this also is a good source of revenue, so it cannot be neglected. There were superintendents of salt, Lavanadhyaksha. You see a very well-defined system and structure for collection of revenue, for administration, not just departmentally, also geographically. So, you had geographical divisions, like today we have district and taluka and village and that kind of a thing. So those divisions were also there.
So you mentioned the various departments and the superintendents who looked over these departments. Were there any superintendents to watch over the violations also? And were there any laws related to these?
Well, yes. It was a very well-defined system, as I said. And every superintendent had his own right of, looking over the violations. For example, there was a superintendent of passports, Mudradhyaksha as he was called, who issued passes to every traveler, and there was a fee of 1 masha. Now, masha is one of the currencies of that time. Masha, pana, karsha, pana, different currencies were that time. So, if a person is found traveling without a pass, then he was fined with 12 panas, another currency. They all had rights of, taking actions against the violations. So, it was a very, I won't say foolproof, because there will always be loopholes, but yes, it was very well thought of.
Yes, they seem to have covered all bases.
Everything.
Yes,
correct. Again, more interesting is the trade and commerce was so developed that we had independent guild systems, and they are called as shrenis. And these guilds were very important. These were like trade unions of those times, and these were the trade unions of manufacturers, of merchants, and of the traders. What is more interesting is you have to understand that how economy has always played an important role in the entire running of the state.
True.
These guilds had the autonomy of making their own laws and dispensing justice. So they were making laws about, what is going to be the pricing of commodities, how it is going to be distributed. They had their own authority to do all these things. They had also the authority to have their own armies, which sometimes were helping the kings, the existing kings. So whenever the king required, so that is how the economy has always helped the polity. I mean, that is something again we have to understand. And they were also the training grounds for the internal trade. So, whatever that trade was, if it was a guild of carpenters, then the younger generations of the carpenters were being trained internally. So even that was controlled. So they were institutions in themselves.
Were these Shrenis also minting money other than, did they have their own currencies, or would it affiliate with the Rajans?
Yeah, sometimes they had their own currency also. They had
along with their own armies. Yes. Wow, that's a lot of power they wielded.
Yes, they did.
So when we have to try and understand, as we can clearly see, these laws are still relevant and they make a lot of sense and they follow a logical flow. So if we have to understand the ancient Indian law more carefully or analyze it deeply, so where do we begin and what are the sources that we can tap into?
The sources are, as I have been talking, first and foremost the literary sources, the text, and in that it starts with Vedas, then the Brahmans, Smrutis, okay, and like Kautilya's Arthashastra and other Dharma Shastra Granthas. Then there are inscriptional evidences. So, in the later times, wherever we find inscriptions, if the king has given some commands, especially, you can refer to Ashoka's stone edicts, and which are very important to understand how the whole thing was functioning. And then other material remains, as I said, in Indus civilization, all that we have is material remains. But then you can also look at the coins from the earliest times, the seals and sealings, and weights and measures. All these are a very clear evidences of the legal systems and sources of understanding legal systems. And today, when each one of us cannot go back to all these things, let me tell you one particular important source which you can refer to in modern times, and that is Bharat Ratna P.V. Kane's volumes on history of Dharma Shastra. It's a commendable work done by a single person, 6,500 pages produced by one single person and covering the entire gamut of Indian legal system.
Thank you, Chetana. It has been a great talk, and other than P.V. Kane's Dharma Shastras, we thank you also for making it easy for us to understand the legalese from ancient India. Thank you.
Ancient Indian Legal System. You heard the 26th episode of our all-new series on traditional Indian knowledge systems, Power of Listening. The expert on the show was Advocate Chetana Gosavi, eminent writer and Indologist. Talking to her was Nisha Poyarekar, science communicator and writer. We hope you enjoyed it. This series has been conceptualized by Shashi Shekhar Vempati, CEO Prasar Bharati, and produced by Neelima Patwardhan and Vinod Kumar. Special thanks to AIR Pune, Amol, Parth and Randheer Thakur for their contributions. This episode is also available on our official YouTube channel, Akashvani AIR. Be there on the 1st of April, same time, same frequencies. This is Manoj Mainkar signing off from Delhi. Bye for now.